Hello and welcome to Inking on the Fly with me, Amy Jasper. Hi. I'm kind of excited, as I usually am, to share a fun technique with you. This one is, it's a lantern card is what I'm going to call it. A lantern easel card might be more specific. So you can see that it is pretty simple on the front side. But simple makes, I don't know, I think it kind of helps. It just works. It works with this particular design, I think. Simple is good. So it's quite simple on the front, and then it opens up like a trifold kind of design. But then it stands like that. And then once it's standing, you can put a tea light inside the card like this, and then it shines through, which of course is hard to see on my tabletop, but it shines through, creating this lovely easel card that you can display on a mantle. So it's one of those kind of cards that you would include in a gift package, like a gift box or something, and that would be the card in the box. And of course you would include the tea light, the artificial tea light, that way they can have all of the elements to be able to display the card on a shelf or their mantle. Yeah, so that's what I'm sharing with you today. So let's get started. All right, so this one starts with a few elements here and some scoring. Let me just grab it. There we go. So if you had a kit from me, you will have some elements such as this piece of evening evergreen cardstock. This measures 11 inches long and 5 inches wide. I did that on purpose. It's just a little bit, the finished card is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And that's simply just because I'm starting with an 11-inch piece of cardstock. If I had a 12-inch piece of cardstock, I could maybe do a different measurement, but my cardstock is 11 inches. So because of that, and wanting to do the trifold design, the triple fold or triple panel design, it became 3 3/4 by 5. So there you go. That's my reasoning. So then you have to score it. Let me just look at my scoring here. What did I do? I've scored here at 3 3/4 and then at 7 1/2 inches. So that's your scoring for this card. Now, when you fold it, you'll notice that the inside piece is going to be shorter, which makes it easier to fold, than the outside piece. So when you fold it, it's going to be like so. Okay, so it's shorter on the inside. That's the 3 1/2 inch section. And then the front and the back are 3 3/4 inch. Okay, so knowing which is your front is important for the next steps. So here I have a piece of the Tidings and Trimmings Designer Series paper. This comes in 6 by 6. So this is 3 inches tall by 5 inches wide. So to create the opening where that pine tree is, where the light's going to shine through, I need to put these two pieces together and punch them at the same time. That will make it easiest for lining them up. So I have the pine tree punch, and I can just lay that pine tree punch on my tabletop and place my two pieces at the same time into the punch. Now, normally I would not choose to punch two pieces of paper at the same time, But this is technically 1.5 pieces of paper because the designer series paper is quite thin. And there are times when I will punch through 2 pieces of cardstock, but it's not really recommended. It can be a bit tough on your punch. So if you can avoid punching through 2 pieces at one time, that is better. It's easier on your punch. So I'm going to punch these 2 together, holding them so that they're lined up on the edges here, and then all the way into my punch. That way it's just easier and I know it's straight. And I'm going to be about, I would say it's about 3/8 of an inch from the left side is where my punches are going to be. And I have to stand up for this. Oh my goodness. Whew, it's hard work. So now it's gone through both pieces at once. I have my 2 trees that I am going to use. This one I'm going to be working with the other side, which is, of course, designer series paper has 2 sides. Well, all paper has 2 sides. Designer series paper has 2 patterned sides. So we can work with those, you know, make it work with our card, right? Okay. So the next thing we want to do, we've got those lined up, so that's great, but we're not going to glue those together yet. First, I want to take my piece of vellum. This piece of vellum is cut just big enough to fit over that hole, and that is cut to be 2 inches by 2.5 inches wide. So that can go over top of my hole on the front of my card. And I don't have to be too particular about where my adhesive goes, but I'm going to put some kind of around my tree. I don't want to go too high up because this paper is only 3 inches high. So I want to make sure that none of my adhesive is going to show through or above my paper. But it's just enough to get my vellum to stick down. Like that. I think that's high. Yeah, that's good. A little bit down. Okay. Ah! It's not stuck yet. There we go. So once I have my vellum on there, then I can adhere my die cut piece. And because I've already punched it, I don't have a choice as to which side I use, but if, you know, it would look nice with the other side showing too. That's another option. Maybe I should try that actually on another card. Whoops. But I'm not doing that this time because I've already determined which side I'm using. If I did use the other side, I would alternatively use this side of the tree. So that could be, that's a thing. That would look great, I think. So this can go on the front of my card, and I know it's going to line up because I designed it to do so. There, and then that way it looks nice on the outside, but it also looks nice on the inside because it's been punched to work together. So there's our opening for the light to shine through. So then we can continue decorating that outside. So I have some of the Playful Pets designers, no, what is it even called? It's from the combo pack from the Playful Pets Trim. Playful Pets Trim Combo Pack is what it's called. It has this and it has the black and white thick baker's twine, which I love as well. I use that a lot. But this is 22 inches of the red stitched ribbon that comes with it. This is quite a nice narrow ribbon. Easy to work with. So I'm just tying it in a bow and I'm making sure that it's flat on the back side because that's going to show when the card gets open. So it's nice to, I always try to make them flat on the back side anyways, just because the The ribbon tends to behave how I expect it to behave when it's flat on the back. And then you don't have extra bulk, of course, too. So then I can just tie this in a bow to the left of my tree. Like that. It's a bit loose. That's okay. You don't want it too loose. This might be too loose, but I won't fuss with it. I'll fuss with it later. Okay, so then I have a couple of trees. These trees I'm going to do some sponging with, so let me just put aside my card for now. I want to do some sponging. I'm going to use Evening Evergreen Ink and a blending brush. A sponge dauber would work great for this as well, but my blending brushes are handy and ready to go. I'm just going to bring in a piece of scrap paper so that I don't muck up my background here. I can keep it looking new and fresh as long as I possibly can. So I'm just going to sponge around the edges with my blending brush. It just helps the paper to kind of pop a little bit off and to kind of show, I don't know, it gives it a little more dimension, I guess. So I'm focusing just on the edges. And I find that the Designer Series paper needs a little more work than the cardstock because it just takes the ink differently. So I'm adding quite a bit to the Designer Series paper, but I won't add that much to the cardstock. Okay, that's pretty good. And then this one, I have a lighter touch. Now when this card is lit up and sort of sitting in the dark, you don't see the details on the front of the card so much as you would in the daylight. But even with the room dimmed, you would see the card and the lit up part. So that looks pretty good. A little bit of ink on my fingers. It's important to take note of that because I don't want to get ink on my card, especially when I'm working with white cardstock later. See, I've got some ink on there. That's okay. Kind of goes with the job, right? Okay, back to our card base. So we have our card, we've got our trees. I'm basically going to glue the trees together, and I can do the pattern tree in the front or put the pattern tree in the back. I seem to be liking the pattern tree at the back, so I think I'll stick with that. So before I stick it on the front of my card, I like to figure out their kind of layering and just glue them together first, and then I can put dimensionals on the back. And then stick them on the card together. So the grid paper here can help me make sure that they're straight. I mean, I could have trees that are leaning. I have a tree in my backyard that is leaning. I had another tree in my backyard that was leaning, and then that tree decided to fall down. That was not a good day. I miss that tree actually quite a lot. It was a very sad day. Okay, I'm going to put dimensionals on the back. And then that can just go on the front of my card. Easy peasy. I can get the backings off. There we go. Okay, so those two little trees can go on the front of my card. Kind of like them down a little bit. I don't want to cover up my open tree area too much. So cute. Okay, that's the outside. It's really simple, but there's a certain elegance to that simplicity, I think. So let's open it up and we'll finish our inside of our card. So for the inside, I have a piece of basic white cardstock. This one measures 4 3/4 by 3 1/4 inches. And that's going to go just in the inside of my card. But before I do that, I want to stamp on it, because if I stamp on it after I've already put it in my card, I might stamp it crooked. So if I stamp it first and then put it in my card, I'm less likely to end up with it crooked. Or if I do, I can fix it. So the stamp I'm using is from the Stars Are Shining stamp set from Stampin' Up. The stamp sentiment that I'm using is called Celebrate the Wonder. So, or is called that. It is that. It says Celebrate the Wonder. But yeah, Be Merry and Bright would work. I like the idea of it being a long, thin sentiment, because there's not a lot of room on my card for something that takes up more room, unless I put it inside the card, which I could, but I'm not going to. So I'm using Real Red ink. And that's going to go on the front of my card, slightly to the right. Like that. So then that can go in my card. And it's just, you know, centered, the standard way inside the card. Trying not to smudge my ink in case it should be dry, but just in case, I don't want to smudge it. And then I have a piece. This is just a strip of Real Red cardstock. And if you got a kit from me, then you probably ended up with a strip that's too long, because it should be 5 inches long. So I think I just forgot to do that last step of trimming them down to the size I want. But I want it the same width as my card base. So I'm just going to trim it by hand, because it's so narrow that chances are I'll be able to trim it straight, or straight enough anyways. And I chose that narrow to be that narrow so that it would balance with the ribbon, because the ribbon's quite narrow. Okay, that's going to go on dimensionals. The reason for that is so that this piece can have kind of a stopper to stop it from sliding. That helps it stand and get that easel shape going. So I am going to use dimensionals, but because this is such a narrow strip, I need to cut my dimensionals in half. Otherwise, they will show. I don't want them to show. So I'm just going to cut them in half and place them evenly on my strip of red paper. Again, peeling off the backs. Every now and then I forget one and I don't peel off a back, and then I wonder what happened. It's not sticking. It happens. We forget these things, or we think we grab it and then we lose it. Okay. So that's going to just go above. So it's basically framing that sentiment, right? And again, I'm using my grid paper to help me make sure it's straight, mostly. So I want it to be, oops, it can be a bit higher than that. There. So that again is really clean and simple, just like the front of the card. It doesn't need to be fancy, especially if you're going to make a whole bunch of cards. Keeping it simple, especially with Christmas cards, is really helpful when you're making like 50 or more of the same card, or lots of cards in general. Maybe you don't make the same card for everybody, but maybe you make, I don't know, 5 of the same or 10 of the same. And then that's it. It just stands there like that, rests on that stopper that we just created, and closed. It looks nice as well.